Alright, so this is the drive up to Hua Hin Muay Thai Gym. It's in Hua Hin. If you're not familiar with Thai geography, Hua Hin is down on the little kind of Gulf of Thailand. So where I live in Pattaya is over here, and Hua Hin is across that little gulf. So it's down below Bangkok by, I don't know, 3 hours or something like that. It's a nice beach community. It's kind of quiet, flat, nice little like tooth mountains that come out of nowhere. Kaisuwit is who we're coming to train with. He's also known as Pipern. And he ran the Grand Thai boxing gym and promotion for many, many years. So we actually know him from being a promoter down in Hua Hin and fighting for him. It was at his promotion that I met Karahat because Gansak is a friend of Kaisuwit and had come to corner for me in my fight, and he brought Karahat with him. So that's how we met Karahat. Kaisuwit is really cool in that even during COVID, he's worked really hard to keep putting on promotions, which is very hard to do. There's lots of regulations, but to him it's really important to help support the community of Muay Thai down in Hua Hin. So this is giving work to young fighters, allowing them to actually keep fighting when it's very hard to do. Got some baby cows up in here. Very sweet. Some of the sessions in the Muay Thai Library are very non-verbal. Some of the teachers are just incredibly demonstrative, and they're just showing things physically all the time. And so my commentary in those sessions is really just trying to explain what something feels like or kind of what they're trying to show me. In this session, there are many like this as well. Kaisuwit is very verbal. A lot of what he's teaching me, he's speaking about kind of theoretically or conceptually how you use these things strategically. And because so much of what he's teaching actually is basic, like what he's literally teaching me is very basic, but the concept and the strategy and the use of it is kind of more broad. I fit this session in the kind of like intermediate level of Muay Thai. You can watch it as a beginner and you can watch it if you're advanced, but to me it's a nice little like intermediate session. I learned a lot from him. So because he talks so much, I'm gonna be trying to translate. I'm gonna try to keep up with my translation of what he's saying to me in each section, but something to really pay attention to, because in general, what he's trying to teach me here is using kind of symmetry, centrifugal force for the power of your strikes. This is something that Kong Samut, who's in the Muay Thai Library, he's amazing. Chachai Sasakun also uses this like weight transfer of going through your target, kind of Xing through your target to build power. And General Tanwakom does the same kind of thing, but he twists a little bit more and less of a stepping. It's more of a twist from the core from him. But these 3 sessions in the Muay Thai Library totally fit into what Kaisuwit is teaching me in this session. So pay attention to how he's showing how to kind of set up on one side in order to build the power on the other. And anytime you strike, coming back in that other opposite direction is kind of like building your power to be sweeping through your opponent all the time. He also talks a lot about kind of range. And if you watch when he's throwing his punches, he actually had a longer career as a Western boxer than he did in Muay Thai, but he did both sports. If you watch his punches, they remind me so much of Kong Samut. They are so clean and consistent and perfect. And Kaisuwit is not a tall man. He's like my height. I'm 5'1", and the length he gets on his punches is just nuts. It reminds me of actually Sagat. When Sagat, who's also not tall, but he's taller than both of us, when Sagat jabs, he somehow has like a 6-foot tall man's jab. It's so long. So you'll see Kaisuwit demonstrate this, and he tries to correct my jab with the same thing. Watch his overall form and his legs as he's throwing the length of his punches. This is right where his gym is. So there's a small food stall market. There's a 7-Eleven. These beautiful mountains are kind of what you're looking at while you're training. And then he's got a nice open air gym that you train in, but then he also has his fight promotion out of his gym. So this is, I've fought at this venue a couple of times as well. It's got such a cool atmosphere, like day and night. It's just got this cool ambience to it. I really like his gym. Hua Hin Muay Thai Gym. Alright, so I'm just starting out with some shadow boxing. This is Kaisuwit or Krupern. He's kind of like setting things up around me, but he's watching. Again, he's a promoter for me, so he's seen me fight a bunch of times over many years, and he's kind of talking to me about how, like, you already know so many things, I'm not really sure what to show you. But what he's saying to me is, there are a couple of things that I can correct with you, and he's like, for some fighters, when you fix one or two specific things, it just makes them incredibly hard to fight. You have to select a few things, and it just changes a game. This is beautiful. This means that he has eyes to be able to see very small, detailed changes he can make in a fighter. So look at how he's scanning me, how he's looking at my shoulders first. This is interesting because I tend to look at feet. He's looking at my shoulders first because he makes a point about how to use your shoulders for punches, and then he'll scan my feet to see what my balance is like. I get really nervous when people have me shadow box. I go way too fast. And so one of the first things when I'm shadow boxing so that people can analyze me, one of the first things is they're like, calm down. So he's telling me actually to stand differently on my feet. He's saying that it slows you down to be flat-footed, which we all know, but he's talking about on the balls of your feet. If you have your balance too much on one side rather than nicely on the balls of your feet, see how he bent at his waist when he was showing me that? He's like, if you bend like this and have like a kind of dent in your posture, your lower body becomes inaccessible to you. So relax. He's saying relax your guard even though it's up. See how his shoulders have this total flexibility to them as he's punching. And see how he's bringing his heels up as he punches? This is his point about being on the balls of your feet. You're not like walking around like you're a raptor. Your heels come up with a flexibility as you're moving. So he's saying that when your left goes, your right side swings back. When your right side goes, your left side swings back. So this is the centrifugal, like, swinging motion that I was talking about in the drive-up. General Tanwakom talks about this a lot. Charchai Sasakun has a complete, like, symmetry to the way he's moving. Those two are really good examples of what he's talking about in terms of if you send your left side forward, including with a kick or a punch, your right side is accommodating it. Look how long his jab is. So he's saying push your shoulder out and the opposite one goes back. So he wants me to feel the twist in my torso. See how much his whole body just kind of like turns, but his feet aren't moving in a weird way. If his feet moved, he would have to like over adjust back in the other direction. His upper body moves, but his feet stay flexible with the heel coming up. Look how long that jab is. He's saying that if you jab really long like that, the opponent doesn't have courage to come past it. So you're keeping them at the end of your punches. What he's doing here, where he's bending his body, that's what I'm doing. You create like a C shape, like you scoop out your front side, but you don't bend it. See how he's making like an angle? You don't want like that. You want kind of like a soft C shape, which it has to do with your hips. You want your hips kind of forward, but not bent. So this is what he's saying. He's like, Sylvie, you already fight really well. Just change one or two things and you just become incredibly hard to fight. It's these small things. It's like suddenly someone's flexibility in their feet changes and their power goes up like 40%. It's crazy. Look at his feet. Look at how his heels pop up. And he's talking about like how your waist twists with the punch. That's how he gets the length on his punches, is the rotation in his hip gives him an additional like 5 inches on his punches. See how long? Those are hooks and uppercuts. Wang Shanoi talks about how in boxing, everything is very tight because there's no elbows. In Muay Thai, there's elbows, kicks, and knees. So the punches are all much longer. So you'll see even his uppercuts are very long out in front. His hooks are very long. So he's going to talk about this a lot during this session. He's using an interesting word, saying ting. Ting means to like throw something away, abandon something, leave it. He's basically saying you're abandoning your weight to your front, like you're throwing your weight to the front. And so you're kind of off balance all the time. If your weight is front foot all the time, you can't do a lot with your front side. You have to throw your backside. If you're a back foot fighter, all you can do is defend. You know what someone's doing, so you want to become more balanced between front and back so that you have access to both sides and to all your weapons very, very quickly. I used to actually really be head first. I used to really fall forward a lot, so I feel like I'm not that way anymore because I've made improvements, but as he's talking about this, I can see how my weight is being kind of like pulled forward from what he's talking about that hinge in the hip. So I'm saying I'm short already. So if I like hunch and goon too much, I'm even shorter. He's saying if you're very short, you already have this disadvantage. So what you're trying to do is maximize your length at a short size, but you want to get in by being the second, you want to be the counter fighter. So if you're really long, if you're a tall fighter, you can be first, you can strike first. If you're short, you want to have your opponent go first so that you can counter or whatever and get in and close distance from your opponent opening themselves up with strikes. So he's saying when two opponents are very close, like if they have similar techniques, similar skills, similar strength, it's going to come down to how they use those things. It comes down to strategy, timing, this kind of thing. So when I was saying earlier that a lot of what he's teaching me is kind of strategic or conceptual, this is what he's talking about. Everyone has the same vocabulary, but how you put it together is whether you win an argument or not. And so he's talking about like how to think about how to put together all of your pieces in order to win exchanges with someone who's maybe taller or faster, any of these things. So I'm saying if you're a short fighter and you're trying to jab, it's not going to reach someone who's taller than you. So he's saying you have to cut angles, you have to go to the sides. So if you're a short fighter, you don't come straight all the time. You have to cut angles in order to find your way in. So he's saying Karhat and Hippie are both short. They don't come straight. They're always kind of angling. They're letting people kick first and they'll kind of pivot off to the side and then come in that way. He's saying if you're a shorter fighter, you want to have really, really good defense because you're basically going to have to eat something on your way in. So you don't want it to like land flush. So he's saying the second your opponent starts to step towards you, like as my weight comes forward onto my front foot, that's when he's going to fire his shot. So if I just come straight towards him, he's going to hit me on the way in. This is something that Karhat does to me all the time. Karhat spent a lot of time teaching me how to read, and part of this was watching someone's weight transfer, watching when their weight starts coming forward. Now you know what they're doing and you can slam them on their way in. Meanwhile, if they're going to come back into defense, they're putting themselves in a posture that they can't alter from fast enough if you're going to hit them the moment they get into that posture. So it's about having fast eyes.
เขาเตะขวาไม่ได้เขาก็ต้องออกซ้ายอย่างเงี้ย
ใช่
So he's saying that if people have their weight on their back foot, you know they can't kick right. All their weight is on their back foot. So you're waiting for their weight to come forward because one, they're coming into your range, and two, now you know they're gonna come try to throw their right leg because they're taking their weight off of it.
ขากับพวกอะไรอย่างเงี้ยพอทิ้งปุ๊บเนี่ยทิ้งปุ๊บเข้าไปแล้วเห็นไหมเข้าไปก่อนแล้ว
Look how long his kick is. I didn't think he could reach me from there.
ก็เหมือนกันคือถ้าสมมติว่าเราช้ากว่าทีนี้เราก็ต้องมาเปลี่ยนเป็นเฟกแทนแล้วเฟกเพื่อที่จะสู้เขาเราก็ต้อง
So he's saying if you're short, you can't be slow. Basically, you have to fake to force your opponent to block or to fire their shot. You're basically forcing your opponent to go first. A lot of Muay Thai in Thailand, everyone knows you want to be Jangwat Song. Everyone wants to be the counter fighter because there's so many advantages to it because you can spoil what your opponent is doing and then hit them back. If you have two people who are trying to be Jangwat Song, you have two people who are trying to be counter fighters, you have to goad your opponent into going first. And the way you do that is by faking. So this is his turn forward. See how like composed and easy it is. He's not too tense. He does something that Chai kind of does, which is that he puts his shoulders kind of on a little shelf. So they're up, but they're not tense. And once his shoulders are locked into place, his arms are actually quite loose. So this is if your opponent is already against the ropes. If they're already against the ropes, there are only a few directions they can move in. They have to go left or right, or they have to come straight forward. So you've basically reduced the possibility of what your opponent can do, and so your reactions to what they can do is super minimized, which is easy. Now you know 2 things that you can do rather than 10 things that you can do.
ถ้าเราสปาริ่ง
ก็เหมือนกับซินวีที่ชนะเขาทุกครั้งอ่ะเพราะซินวีเป็นคนที่มีกระดูกดีอายุมากกว่าเขาเลยเข้าใจว่าซินวีได้ล็อกคออยู่ถ้าสมมุติว่าเป็นมวยไทยซินวีเห็นเขาต่อยกันไหมเขาจะมีลูกป้ายลูกขวางนี่เราจะตีเขาได้ไหมทีนี้ใช่หรือเปล่านั่นแหละอันนี้พอกระดูกเท่ากันนี่อายุเราได้เปรียบเขาเรากดคอเขาอยู่เข้าใจไหมแล้วเราต่อยมวยเหมือนกับคนไทยวันหนึ่งต่อย2 ครั้งได้นั่นแหละมันคือสิ่งที่
So he's saying that with my style, because I like to lock, you can fight 2 fights in one day because you don't take a lot of damage. So basically you're like shutting your opponent down and being able to not exert as much energy and not being able to take as much damage because you've basically locked your opponent into place. Look at this point he's making about his chest. He keeps his chest very open. He's not like sinking his chest. He's not caving it in. He has, again, his shoulders are in place, but they kind of like allow his punches to come out in this very loose, long way. And his chest is open so that you can actually see the shoulders moving from left to right with each of his strikes.
เราก็ตีเขาไม่ได้แล้วกรรมการก็ต้องแยกแล้วใช่ไหมล่ะนั่นแหละเราก็ต้องมีลูกเสริมเนี่ยลูกฮุกลูกอัปเปอร์คัตลูกต่อยเนี่ยมาสู้มาเสริมเขาอีก
So he's saying that you have to use all different kinds and all different angles of weapons so that you're not just locked into one position. If you're just in one position and you're just throwing left, right, you become very predictable. So he's saying that you have to get yourself into it's like a stick shift where there's a neutral position that you can get into any gear from that neutral position. The neutral position is this open chest, kind of loose but positioned shoulders and these long punches. You can throw anything from there. Here he's explaining why Muay Thai uses a long guard. In boxing, there's no elbows, so this 11 guard is something that you can do in boxing for protection. In Muay Thai, because there's elbows, the long guard is much preferred because you can actually snuff someone's punches from a distance and stop their elbows from being able to come in. If you're just like this, the elbows can come all the way in. So he's saying that using the knees to protect yourself as well keeps someone at a distance where those elbows are not going to be landing.
มันบล็อกไว้แล้ว
So you can also use it as a protection when people are trying to grab you in the clinch.
เห็นไหมมันก็บล็อกได้เหมือนกัน
So the short guard, the 11 guard, is when someone is trying to grab you for the clinch. You can protect yourself, but you have the other arm coming forward in the long guard in order to keep them at a distance or to be hitting them first so that they literally can't reach you.
แต่ว่าซินวี่ไม่ค่อยเตะเนาะปกติแต่ตอนนี้มาดีขึ้น
He's making fun of me. He's like, you don't kick. He's like, Sylvie never kicks.
ทีนี้เราดีขึ้นเยอะแล้ว
So he's saying that in order to have weapons at all distances and all ranges, because you want to hit your opponent on your way in as well, I need to start believing in my kicks as the like widest weapon, the like farthest weapon before you come in.
ถ้าสมมุติว่าแบบซินวี่เมื่อก่อนอยู่เงี้ยเห็นไหมเนี่ยบอดี้มันเก๊กอะพอบอดี้มันแข็งปุ๊บมันออกไม่ได้
So he's saying that when you just close yourself up with this maximum guard like this, your body becomes really stiff as well. So he wants you to have like flexibility and movement and rotation in your body, and then you can tense at a moment, you can flex at a moment to protect yourself or like as you're throwing a punch, but you generally want to have this kind of like neutral, able to move in any direction.
ใช่ฝรั่งเขาคิดแต่จะบล็อก
So you want your hands up, but not super tight. It's the tension is the problem with the hands up because you have no flexibility in your guard. If you're just up like this all the time, you can't strike out of it. You can't change your guard if someone is coming at different angles. You want to have plasticity and flexibility in your guard so that you can move, strike out of it, and change position for where someone's strikes are coming at you.
วัยวะเราเนี่ย
So my arm is going longer, but I'm not pulling my shoulder back, which is why I'm not getting the length on that jab that he has, his crazy length on that. Sagat does the same thing. You'll see Sagat turns his body almost completely sideways from the waist up on his jab.
ซ้ายเล่นในขี่ซ้ายเล่นซ้ายเล่นเพราะเราต้องเตะ
So he's making a point here that Yotkunpan actually talks to me about quite a bit, which is that you want to set everything up with your front side, especially because if you're Orthodox and you're facing someone who's also Orthodox, your lead side is to their open side all the time. So basically everything is hitting their open side, and then you can gear up for like a power right kick, which maybe you've changed their stance or maybe you're just going to hurt them with it. But basically your front side is like 70% of what you're doing at any given time. If you're Southpaw and you're fighting another Southpaw, you also are just using your front side all the time. If you're mixed stance, suddenly your backside becomes the open side all the time for everybody, and so you want to kind of use more of that.
คนสูงเขาเตะอย่างนี้ได้เราต้องเปิดแข้งแบบนี้ลักษณะนี้
He's making an interesting point here. So the golden kick, we have a Sylvie's technique vlog on the golden kick, and we have a couple of videos of Karahat showing his kick because it's perfect golden. It comes up and kind of over, so it has this kind of like rising arc to it. What Kaisuwit is telling me now is that the wide kick, the one that's like a baseball bat or kind of, I think they call it a roundhouse kick, this is for a tall fighter because you have like length to spare. If you're short, like me and Kaisuwit, you want it up and over because this is like a switchblade whip thing that you get like way more distance on your kick. Not only are you getting more length on it, but you're not telegraphing it until it's already in the air, so people can't get out of the way of it as easily. See how his foot is coming up kind of the side of my leg, and then it kind of comes over. This is the golden kick. So if I happen to get out of the way, if I happen to see it and I dodge back, he's still balanced that he can teep me if I decide to change direction and come in after that.
มันอยู่ที่เราสมองเราจะไปหรือเปล่ามวยที่เขา IQ เท่ากัน
He's saying that you have to use your brain. You have to think about it and see what your opponent is doing. You can't just like plan what the kick is going to do. It has to be, if the opponent moves, I'm going to do this. If they don't move, it's going to land. If it lands, what do I do after that? Like, this is what shadow boxing is for, is figuring out, what if I have an opponent who has a really nice strong right? What do I do? What do I do if I have an opponent who dodges out of the way all the time?
ง่ายออกเร็วออกหนักขึ้นด้วยเดินมาดูเนี่ยเดินขึ้นมาเลย
Sessions like this are really, really helpful in showing how important shadow boxing is. instruction through shadowboxing, you can adjust and fix everything in shadowboxing. He's catching my leg to show to not turn at the beginning of the kick. That's what gets that like wide kick. You come straight up first and then you turn so that you're hitting with the bottom part of your shin, and it's just as it starts to turn at the end. It doesn't turn as you're accelerating off the ground. Do you see how much distance he just covered right there? You can't run away from that fast enough. I'm like, that punch totally didn't land, and then the kick is just right there.
ถ้าสมมติว่าใช่ถ้าสมมติว่าจะมาเรายังไม่รู้จักไงเรายังไม่รู้จัก
So see that flex in his heels? See how his heels come up and the balls of his feet kind of, it's like he's on a Stairmaster or pedal or something.
เนี่ยคือตัดไปเลยข้างซ้ายเขาไม่ออกซ้ายแน่
So he's saying you want to use your left side all the time. Like you want to be opening everything up with this. But if you're going to throw a power left, you can just walk forward with your right. It's the same thing he was saying earlier about the rotation of your shoulders, is that anytime you throw one side, by putting the opposite side back in the rotation, you now have another power side. You're constantly throwing your power side so long as you're actually rotating your torso and your shoulders.
เขาปิดเนี่ยแค่เรายึดแขนยึดขาเลยยึดพอเรายึดแขนยึดขาเขาไปแล้วเขาอ่านเราไปหมดแล้ว
So he's saying that whoever is faster wins exchanges. So having a good reaction and being able to see what people are doing. If people are coming to kick you and they have one of those wide kicks, you can get teeped while you're on one leg. If you hide your kick until you're actually accelerating and coming out in front, the golden kick, you can't see the kick until it's already turning because it's come up straight first. So you hide your kick better with the golden kick. See how he looks like he's flat-footed and he's not. He's making this point again about staying on the ball of your foot. If you watch his feet, anytime he's doing something, you can see this kind of like lightness, the flex of his heels. He's saying to look the opponent in the eyes, and I was like, I'm shy, I can't do it. So he keeps one arm up, but he really throws the other one. Some people throw the arm down when they're throwing a kick. Some throw it right into the face of the opponent. His emphasis is on moving the shoulder to really get the torque. It doesn't matter whether the shoulder's moving so that it's in the face or moving down. What matters is keeping this guard up and then throwing the shoulder regardless of where the arm goes. So he's saying if you're facing a puncher, someone wants to come and hit you with that back arm, you just keep tagging the arm, your kick is longer, and you're basically pinning their punch to their body. Bukao used to do this a lot. If you watch Bukao when he used to fight in Japan, he was pinning people's punch to their shoulder all the time, just with this constant kick. Oh, I wish he would shadow more. I really like the way he moves. So I can see what he's talking about how I hit the blade of my feet a little bit. It needs to be a little bit more like this. So I'm saying if you're Muay Thai and you're fighting against a Muay Maat puncher, you have to guard because you're basically having this clash. So he's showing how to use this long guard. He's saying Thai people always protect their jaw with their shoulder when they're throwing these punches. They try to stay really long. So the same way that in boxing you would learn to punch like this and tuck your chin into your shoulder, you guard like that in Muay Thai. Your guard is like this. So see how protected he is when he covers his head like this and brings his long guard out like that. He's tucking his chin behind his shoulders the same way you do for punches. So he's telling me to jab left, and see how he's just guarding it with his back hand kind of in front of his face? if you just kind of like look over your gloves and have this like 11 guard, I can reach him anytime I want. If he keeps one arm long and protects with the other one, if I happen to jab, he's protected on the short side. But the more I dig in, the more he has a counter if I like really throw myself into it. So this is why the long guard is super preferred in Muay Thai. So see how even if I'm throwing to his body, he's still using kind of longer arms to snuff my punches and kind of redirect my punches from a distance. But not this. See how he's like leaning his weight forward and he's bending at the hip the way he told me not to at the beginning? You have to have this posture, you have to have this root that allows you to have flexibility in your movements. If you're too tight, even the long guard, you're going to be falling off of your balance. So he's saying this is just an opening. Even if you're like hands all the way up but super tight, it's just openings. You want to have flexibility and length in your guard. See how he's even pushing my arms up higher? It's like a stack. So that way, I basically have movement that I can like push his uppercut down, I can deflect, I can parry. He's saying it's really important to do boxing sparring. For Muay Thai, do boxing sparring so that you can deal with people punching with you and be calm with stuff coming at your head. And then all your other weapons will just be available once you're doing the full range of Muay Thai. Look at how high. He's not tense, but look at how high he keeps his hands. So he's saying you keep everything up really high, and then if you're going to be ducking down to go to the body, you have to tuck your chin so that if someone's going to hit you while you're trying to hit their body, they're just going to be kind of like you're taking it on the crown. See how he's guarding with his elbow? And he can counter me at the same time. But can't put your butt back. He's saying if you think that you have to guard absolutely everything, you'll just be exhausted. The thing you really have to guard is your chin. I went for a body punch and my head came down a little bit for that. And he threw a head kick. He wouldn't be able to throw that if he was bent at the waist, the way he was telling me at the beginning to not do that kind of hinge at the waist. You want to have access to your lower body all the time. And so your hip position is what creates that accessibility or just having it completely be off limits other than like stomping around. So a lot of what he's showing me in these counters, you don't do that on the first one, right? So if he's blocking like this and I keep throwing that jab, he's not going to uppercut on the first one. He's going to get me like really pushing on that punch before he's going to do it. So if I throw a hook, it's the third one that he's going to counter hook me on. I'm asking him about this head kick that he was doing on me while I was punching. I was like, we're short. Do you practice this head kick on a bag? Like, how do you practice kicking someone's head at such short range? And he's not understanding me. He's saying that you have to practice kicking the leg and the waist. He's like, you're short. You're not going to throw a lot of head kicks. And I was like, but when someone comes to punch you in the stomach, their head comes down so you can reach their head. He changed this to that it's a mistake when people come to punch the body and they bring their head down too far. That head kick is catching someone's mistake. What he's showing here is something that I refer to as breaking the frame or blowing out the frame. The balance of the body over your feet is your frame. If you see someone's head go over their foot in these directions, this is breaking the frame. That's what he was showing on the bag, how if you're like twisting to throw your hook and you break your frame, you have no power as you're coming over. You've like messed up your alignment. It's like the car is out of alignment. Charchai Sasakun has this whole like looking down a pool cue to make sure that you're like in your frame. So watch his sessions if you want to see more detailed example of what I mean by staying in the frame. So see how my head is not going over my foot and my shoulder's not going outside my knee in order to throw those hooks or those turns? It's all this like shoulder throwing back, foot outside enough that you can come across the bag. For him, the back of the neck and the head position is what aligns the entire body. So look at how he's aligning himself in front of the bag. His chin and the back of his neck is all this one piece like this, and his body can just kind of like swivel around it. He's breaking his frame now. He's talking about coming outside of this like center line. If your jaw comes off the center line or if your head goes out the center line, you lose your balance and you lose power. He's saying you don't have to twist too much. It just, the shoulder's there and it comes around. As long as you're aligned, the shoulder is the only part that has to come out. Oh, oh. He reminds me of Kong Samut when he's doing this. He said there's no power in this. This kind of like bringing your head over your knee outside the line. There's no power in this. You get into a weird like crouch, out of which you're exploding, but you're like totally misaligned. Look at how his body doesn't seem to be moving at all, but all the power is kind of like flipping around the sides. He likes that one too. My shoulder is throwing back. That's why he likes this like shoulder, shoulder. Everything stays moving around the like center core. And so he's saying that low kicks can come out of this. You throw like a left hook, and then again, you've set up your body's right side to have lots of power coming across the opposite side. If you throw the leg kick on the right, you've now set up power for everything from the left to come around. So look at how he's doing a 50-50 of his weight on his feet. He's not like chonk, 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 like 100% weight on each leg. It has a bit of a like kind of sway. Nah. So you don't want to be like stomp, stomp, stomp. You want to be like float, 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 float a little bit, if that makes sense. So he's making a point that Diesel Noi makes about the teep. If your standing leg is bent when you're teeping, there's no power to it. Your standing leg has to have this kind of trunk-like solidity to it. It doesn't mean you're flexing it, it doesn't mean you're locking it, it doesn't mean you're like on your standing leg. But the standing leg has become a post that all your power can like launch itself off of. If you don't post yourself on your back leg, what he was just showing me there is you lurch your weight forward, it follows your teep. So see how he keeps his head over his standing leg, and then he can have extension on his hip on that teep. If you have a tense teeping leg, you end up following with your weight. I'm laughing again at his demonstration of how not to teep. Thai trainers are absolutely brutal and funny when they demonstrate how not to do something or show you how you're doing it wrong. It's like very clearly wrong. So he's talking about short distance. So he's saying you have to understand the distance between you and your opponent. If your teep is short, you need to have short distance between you and the opponent. If your opponent's far away from you, you need a long teep. You can't just like teep one way regardless of what you're doing. It depends on where your opponent is, whether they're coming towards you, whether you're coming towards them. These are all different weight adjustments on your teep.
ทำให้เราออกอาวุธง่ายขึ้นเร็วขึ้นทิ้งตัวด้านหลังเลยขยมขึ้นเอาเตะขวามาเตะขวามา
So he's trying to get me to kick right. He's trying to make an adjustment about what he was saying earlier, how it's just too wide. He wants it to come up and in. So he's having me measure myself against the bag so that you're hitting like right up in the rib. And then look at what he's doing with his foot, his standing foot. So he's rising up on the ball of his foot and allowing the twist to be just on the ball of his foot. You don't want to be on a flat foot trying to like twist your whole flat foot on the kick. You want to rise up and have a little bit of a like slight rotation.
ตัวเราก็เหมือนกับตัวนั้นไอ้ใบพัดมันหมุนเนี่ยให้มันไม่มีน้ำหนักอย่างนี้มันจะได้ขึ้นเร็วขึ้น
He's comparing my kicking leg to a fan. He's saying that it's just this like locked piece that's just going to go like this the whole time, that you don't want it to just be like moving in one position. The flexibility of the foot allows it to move. It allows the kick to be longer. It allows it to catch the opponent. The way he's saying it's like a blade on a fan, it's stuck in one position and the blade is just going to go like this. So basically you have to bring a target into the fan to hurt it rather than being able to come out.
ขีดนิ้วเท้านี่เนี่ยขีดนิ้วเท้าไม่ใช่ขีดนิ้วเท้าที่ก้าวขึ้นไปเนี่ยมวยที่เราเตะเป้าเนี่ยเราต้องก้าวขาเนี่ยเห็นไหมก้าวขาไปให้มันเร็วขึ้นเนี่ยขาซ้ายเนี่ย
So he's showing how to fake your weight transfer. So he's popping his hip forward with his foot coming forward a little bit as this like, am I coming? Oh, am I coming? So this is going to kind of like goad your opponent to either try to kick you or try to stop you, and then you can take. He's saying that if you just step forward for real with your front leg, they can pull your leg out. So you want to do this like forward flex as a fake to hide when your weight is actually coming forward. If you're honest and every time you step forward, you're actually coming forward, it's very smart for your opponent to be able to just kind of pull your front foot out. This is why if you're a Muay Thai fighter and you're facing someone who's like a boxer and basically all they do is boxing, is you just want to take their front foot all the time.
ถ้าเผื่อเราไม่รู้เนี่ยเราคิดว่าเราเสียเปรียบเขาแล้วเอาจับขาดิ
So he's saying that when you face someone, you never know what disadvantages you're going to have. If you go to teep someone, you don't know whether they're going to catch your teep or not. So he's talking about where you put that standing leg. See how far behind him he's put that standing leg? He's like, if I've posted myself and created this angle like this, you can move my leg wherever you want it to go. I'm not going to lose my balance. See how I'm trying to keep my standing leg away from his kicking leg? Now he wants me to make my leg really heavy, like push it down towards the ground. So the second he catches my teep, I want to make that outposted leg really heavy and have my standing leg be as far away from him as possible. That way I have flexibility. I can hop if he decides to push me or pull me, and if he tries to lift it, I have the weight on it. See how I have balance as he's trying to spin me too. So he's saying that because you never know what someone's going to do, if they're going to catch your teep, if they're going to move from your teep, you have to have control of your teep all the time. The way he's keeping himself from spinning out by me throwing his leg is by making his caught leg very heavy. So I was asking him, if someone's teeping, why don't you just bat it away? And he's like, batting it away is number one because you ruin their balance. So number one, if someone's coming to teep you, is just bat it out of the way. He said you might have to catch it. Like if their teep has already touched your stomach, they've already scored. If they've already touched your stomach, you can't really bat things away. You want to catch it if they've already made contact with you.
ซินวี่ยืนขาแบบอย่างเดียวคือต้องยืนอย่างนี้ยืนตึงๆเนี่ย
This is how I still stand. I'm still very like kind of peg-legged and too floppy on my feet.
มวยศอกซินวี่
He wants it to be a little bit more soft.
รู้อยู่แล้วนี่พอเราหลอกเนี่ยพอเขาจะเข้าในตู้ทัดไปไม่ต้องไปออกมากเราคิดให้น้อยเราเรียนอย่างหนึ่งให้
So he's making a point about shadowboxing here. He's like, you don't throw like just anything you want as you're shadowboxing. You have to think of how the things actually work together. You want to visualize someone in front of you. So if you're throwing this jab, at what point can you throw that upward elbow? Like, what is the opponent doing that you would throw that?
อยู่นี่เลยเก็ตเลยเก็ตเนี่ย
For him, the way he sets his whole composure, his whole roop, is with his chin. Once his chin is locked in place here, everything below to him feels like it's basically in the correct setting. It's hard to like bend at the waist the way I was before if you have a proper chin tuck. If you float your chin, it's very easy to like bend at the waist. If you tuck your chin, you're like staring at the floor if you bend at the waist the way I was before.
เป็นแค่การเฟกได้แต่ว่ามันหวังผลไม่ได้นี่ปากก้าวยับมวยเตี้ยนี่ก้าวขานี่ให้เก่ง
Oh, so long. Look at his feet. His back foot is doing what Sagat's back foot does, which is it is like stuck to the floor so that he goes back to the same position he wants to be at. But his front foot has this total flexibility to it that allows him to have crazy reach with his jab. See how my back foot is coming up off of the ground? I don't have my return position. I have to like readjust myself to come back, which means that I can't get away from my punch making contact as fast as he can by leaving his foot stuck to the ground.
ต้องบิดด้วยนิ้วเท้าโคดยัวโทนิ้วเหรอเนี่ยพอเนี่ยออกปุ๊บเนี่ยเอา
So he's making a point here about how, see how when I come in for that body punch, my foot can't be facing this way. It's got to be pointed this way. If it's pointed this way, I've actually created an opening in my body so that he can knee me while I'm punching. He wants me to kind of close the angle with my foot.
ใช่คุณต้องคิดว่าเนี่ยคุณโอเพนเอวีไทม์เนี่ยยับปุ๊บเนี่ยคุณไม่ใช่คุณยับปุ๊บเนี่ยดูที่ขาคุณก็ต้องก้าวมาเอายับมาเห็นไหมขามันก็ต้องก้าวมาคู่กันแล้วมันเตะเราไม่ได้จังหวะนี้มันต้องแทง
So he's saying that if you punch someone in the stomach and they're kind of take their weight back to take the impact out of the punch, they're not ready to kick in that moment. As they're stepping back, they're not ready to kick.
แม่ที่เราส่งมาเนี่ยเอายืนก่อน
If you let them stay exactly where they are,
มันปิดแล้วเนี่ย
you have a counter on that.
มันไม่พร้อมแล้วมันมุกไปแล้วเขานอกจากเราเข้ามาต่อยมานอกจากคบกันศอกซึ่งสั้นกว่าเราแล้วเข้าใจไหมอาร์มนี่ลองแล้ว
So he's saying that my long punch beats his elbow because it's longer.
เห็นไหมเอาถึงกว่า
So he's basically saying you have to anticipate what someone's counter is to whatever it is that you're doing and choose the movement or the weapon that minimizes their ability to do that counter at the same time that you're throwing your weapon.
คอปล่อยไว้คอตึงไว้ตลอดเลยให้มันไปแต่หัวไหล่คอไม่ต้องไปเนี่ยให้มันมาเซฟออโตเมติกเห็นไหมเซฟออโตเมติก
See how much he's protected? He's totally behind his jaw and his shoulder are totally here, and then because he's rotating this shoulder back, he just pinned my back foot down. What I was talking about earlier, how if you don't keep it in the same spot, you actually have to readjust yourself to come back. Leave that back foot stuck, like nailed to the floor, and let your front foot be the recon mission. So I'm telling him I recognize this from what Sagat does. He like sticks his foot to the floor.
จำไว้เลยว่าข้อเข่าคุณงอนี่น้ำหนักขาคุณทิ้งไปแล้วนี่คือตึงซ้ายตึงขวาแต่งอซ้ายข้างนี้ออกไม่ได้แน่นอนเข้าใจไหมออกไม่ได้
He's talking about how if you don't organize where your weight is in your body, if you put it way too much on one side or way too much on the other side, you've lost entire sides of weapons. He's talking about people who like to post on their back leg and just bounce their front leg. You know all they can do is defense. People who put all their weight on their front leg and are like trying to come after you, all they can do is their backside. So he's saying that you have to not throw out entire sides of your body by having your weight distributed entirely on one side or the other. You want to be like ready to move at any time. It's that neutral position.
ยังไงมันยืนแบบนี้มันต่อยมันต่อยหนักเลยเราก็ต้องมาทวนด้วยกับเขาแล้วมันต้องทำไงก่อนถ้ามันก้าวซ้ายก่อนเราก็ต้องเขี่ยขาเข้าใจไหมเราก็ต้องเขี่ยขาเก่งไงใช่หรือไม่งั้นเราก็ต้องบวกศอกซ้ายเก่งใช่ไหมบวกต้องก้าวขา So
he's saying that if he's going to put all his weight on his front leg, he's coming forward with that jab, I can kick his front leg, right? He's like putting his weight out there. It's a good move for me to counter him by kicking that leg as he comes forward. So he has to have, if she tries to kick my leg, what do I have on the other side of this? If you throw your weight too far forward, like all his weight is on that front leg, he has no counter to whatever I'm doing. If he kind of puts enough on there to have impact in his strike, but it's not completely thrown forward, even if I kick that leg, he's got some kind of counter. Ooh. By staying on the ball of his foot on his front foot, he's not throwing all his weight onto that front leg. He has flexibility to come back. He's like anchoring himself with that back foot.
มันเสียแรงด้วย
ใช่เพราะว่าผู้เป็นมือซ้ายใช่ไหม
ผมเป็นมวยซ้าย
ถ้าชกกับมวยขวาก็ทันยาใต้ทำทุกอย่าง
So he's telling me this whole thing about using your front side the most, like you want to jab, teep, use your front side to set it for your backside. I'm like, you're southpaw, so if you're facing an orthodox, we're just going to be like jabbing each other's front sides. And he's like, yeah, then you just use your backside. So I, as an orthodox fighter facing a southpaw, he's standing southpaw, my right side becomes my defense. I'm basically closing off his power side by throwing my power side into it. So if I start using my front side all the time, see how he can beat me to it with power. So he's saying if you face a southpaw as an orthodox, everything becomes your backside.
แต่ว่าคุณส่วนมากคุณจะเสียเปรียบเพราะว่าส่วนสูงคุณ
So he's saying that I'm at a disadvantage often because I'm short. So I'm always facing someone taller than me. So see how he's using this kind of centrifugal force to create power at this range? If I'm trying to come in straight, it's always the very end of my punches, and I'm at the end of their strikes, which I basically lose to. So by coming and countering at these angles like this, I actually get much more impact as a shorter fighter. So this is how he throws his arm on the kick. It's not really down, and it doesn't stay necessarily in the opponent's face, but it kind of comes back. So when he kicks in shadow, he always kicks high. He lets it go all the way through the motion, and he kicks up all the time because he wants the trajectory of all his kicks to be this golden coming up from the bottom. See how he's using this centrifugal force in what he's showing me? He's like jab, right side, left side. He's really twisting from his shoulders and his torso. He's saying protect yourself as you're coming into the body. See how basically his jab to the body and his protection with his right arm is basically like a long guard. So even if I manage to hit him, he's so tucked, I'm just hitting into the like crown of his skull. So the position of your neck, this kind of like posturing, not stiffness, but setting your neck, protects you for any counters as you're doing things in close. But not all stiff. It's like setting it. This is something that I've really come to understand in Muay Thai in the past couple of years, is that tension, overall tension is bad. Designated tension is really good. So the way he's talking about setting your neck, setting your chin, setting your shoulders, this is designating tension in order to allow flexibility, movement, looseness, power in other areas of your body.
มันไม่เราทุกคนซ้อมมวยมันต้องโดนอยู่แล้วท้องอ่ะ
ใช่ ค่ะ
ได้ไหมเลยยับท้องเลย
All right, so we're doing a little bit of pad work here. You can see that as a shorter person, he actually holds his pads up quite high for the kick. This is probably because most of the farang that he holds for are bigger than him. But because he was in his shadow, kicking high every single time, I think that he kind of has this, I wouldn't call it policy, but kick high, because as you get tired in a fight, your kick will get lower and lower and lower. So basically make everything really high, and it will settle into the right level without getting too low as you get tired. You can see too how he's holding pads. It's for this same kind of patterning that he's talking about, where you use the power from the one side to build power for the other side. So he'll hold for a kick, and then he wants to come with a hook on the other side. You can also see how much space he takes for the kicks. So he's holding for punches here, and then he takes a nice broad step back for the kick, so that you have to follow. Working pivots, this is exactly what he was teaching me about being a shorter fighter, is that you can't just like march straight in. You have to kind of take your angles. So he wants this leg kick here that he was talking about, and he's been showing in this kind of centrifugal force thing throughout the entire session. But you have to step outside of his stance in order to really cut across with that leg kick. See how his foot went kind of outside my right foot? My foot's inside his right foot. I need to step out of it just a little bit. So when he had like the punch and then come back in the elbow, it's that same coming back to neutral. And the way you come back to neutral is this rotation of your shoulders. So I was able to throw 2 strikes on one side with power by the rotation of the shoulders in between. He's saying that in order to not overturn on your knees, you have to come up on your toe. If you stay flat-footed and try to throw a knee, you're going to end up overturning yourself. So you actually want to kind of come up. He has like a pendulum swing of his knee. So you pull your heel kind of up by your hip, but you're throwing it up. So he doesn't want it coming from an angle like this, which is a knee. He wants it to pendulum swing up. I like this too. This is something that he was not holding for that elbow. He just wanted me to pivot to the outside. So it was a little bit of a surprise. But he's showing me how to basically use the long guard to make contact with people. The long guard is not only defensive in the sense of like, oh, you're coming at me, I'm going to go like this. It's not a passive guard. The long guard is actually quite an interactive guard in that you can use that longer arm to push on your opponent, to parry their strikes, to snuff them, all of these things. So he's trying to get me to use my front arm to shove him and kind of change angles and stuff with the long guard, rather than keep it as like a really passive, I'll wait until you're done hitting me and then maybe I'll do something. You want to actually be making contact with that long guard. It's good that we worked on those not breaking your frame hooks on the bag, because when you're doing like a body dig, a lot of people will overturn and bring their head over because they're trying to defend themselves while getting that close to an opponent. You really need to bring your foot outside of them and not break your frame when you're that close. Otherwise, you're kind of like off balance. See how he's checking my distance? I'm like kind of getting too close to him as I'm coming off of that kick. And so he's putting his hand on me as like a checking the distance so I'm not falling into him. That's an indicator that my weight is forward, the way that he was talking to me about as I was shadow boxing. that seems imperceptible to me because it's so much better than it used to be. But when you're falling forward like that, it's your body telling you that your calibration is off.
ยืนขายืนขานี่เก่งอย่างเดียวไม้ต่อยตีน
I'm being live streamed by 2 different people while we're filming this session. So he's saying, don't worry about it, I'm wearing the body pad, you can punch as hard as you want, which, I don't know, makes me think that maybe my punch is not that hard. So see how he's doing that right punch and then into the leg kick. Again, it's this total like rotation of the torso and the shoulders. It seems like I'm, beating a dead horse about this and like talking about it all the time, but it's, again, like he was saying earlier in the session, with some people who already have like a pretty good set or a pretty good style, you change 1 or 2 things and they just become unfightable. It's like unlocking a different level or something. So he's talking about making these punches more snappy. So if I'm just like this, he can knee under it. If I push my punch through, like not being too snappy, I can actually stop that knee from getting to me. But you don't throw every punch like that. You kind of anticipate what they're going to be doing. And again, keeping my guard up like this, my guard is getting lower as I'm trying to like focus on where he wants me to go. Set the shoulders, set the neck, and then everything else can be loose. That's how you conserve energy, is the designating tension where it needs to be. It's like, is that better? Do you feel better? He totally, through his pad work, like kind of set the blocks such that I'm going to be going in this direction. He like patterned my strikes, and he totally used what he's looking for, of this kind of like rotative power coming from each side. I was staying kind of like very front. So I was telling him that I rush too much, and he said something very interesting. He said people who rush are too determined or too decisive. Dangjai means like you've decided to do something, like you've set your heart on something. When people are rushing, it's because they're kind of like trying to get to the thing that they're trying to do, but they're not paying attention to what the obstacles are or what the person in front of them is doing. So you've like over-focused your mind if you're rushing. So in order to slow down, you have to kind of be like, oh, I'll see how it goes. Like, I'll see what my opponent's doing. His imitation of Mua, of like throwing too many things at once. So this is about keeping contact. If you throw and keep coming back to the same spot, you're actually like 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing, is that you want to kind of keep contact. It's that thing with the long guard where you're making contact and you want to like build the pressure of that distance. Like you're constantly eating ground rather than like popping in and out. See how I'm staying closer to him now than I was earlier in the pad work? This is what I was just talking about like building the pressure and keeping contact actually on his pads, using the long guard as an interactive guard instead of a passive guard. It's fun. I've never done pad work with Kaisuwit before. All right, so we just have a tiny little bit of clinch here at the end. As shorter fighters, I'm a shorter fighter, this arm lock is really helpful against... So he locked me on my left side, and then he stuck his foot against my same leg, and he just yanked me. So basically he pulled me over my own stopped leg right there. So here he's timing my knee. So as my knee is coming up, and so I'm on one leg, he's pulling me towards the standing leg. So what he's teaching me here is that with the arm hooks, or with like getting control of an opponent's arm, you're going to be twisting them as they're kneeing on one leg. What he did right there is he went under like onto my flank. He went under my arm, and then on the opposite side, he stopped my thigh with his hand and just kind of like scissored me over the standing leg. Like it goes faster if the person is actually in motion. I was kind of at a standstill. But see, he's showing me how to go up. So you gotta go into the person's like armpit almost, and you want this like upward motion so that their body tips this way towards the leg that you're now stopping. He's saying that you kind of scoop the thigh towards you. If you watch Satan Muang Lek in the Muay Thai Library, his session is almost entirely clinch trips and throws. He does this quite a lot, this kind of like scooping of the leg. But again, it's the same thing that Kaisuwit has been teaching me of the like left and right centrifugal force. What he's doing in clinch is exactly the same thing, where he's using like opposite powers to like twist and rotate to off-balance people. I like that movement. You do it while someone is not expecting it. It's all about timing. If someone's at a dead standstill, you can knock them over, but it kind of wouldn't work. So you really want to time that with when someone is attacking you. Same thing here, pushing his chest. I can like pop him backwards, but if I push it while he's bringing his knee up, that's going to give a much bigger impact for what I'm doing. I'm pushing right on like the center of his two collarbones. Flat hand, just pushing. You'll see this a lot in my videos because I'm a woman. These trainers are being very polite and they don't want to touch my chest. So he's pushing kind of by my shoulder, which you can do, but it's going to push the shoulder back rather than the person. If I were a man, he would be pushing me right on the flat part of my chest here, but because I'm a woman, he's kind of coming to the side. You want to push like kind of right between the collarbones on the chest.